Senator Dick Durbin stopped the blue slip scam blocking Democratic judges. And here's the story, and there's a backstory here that literally goes back to George Washington. Right now, you've got a number of Democratic nominees for judgeships that are being blocked in the Senate by Republican senators. For example, Cindy Hyde-Smith is blocking a judicial nominee by the name of Scott Cullum. Last year, Republican Senator Ron Johnson blue slip vetoed Judge William Pocan, who is the brother of our friend Mark Pocan. They are both gay, and apparently Ron Johnson blue slipped him, vetoed him because he's gay. Roger Marshall and Jerry Moran are bragging that they're going to veto Biden's nomination of Jabari Womble for federal district judge in Kansas because presumably he's black. Now, I called all 5 of Dick Durbin's offices yesterday. Dick Durbin is the senator who is in charge of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and basically, you know, he has the choice. If Cindy Hyde-Smith or Roger Marshall or Jerry Moran want to send back a blue slip that says I don't support this candidate, Dick Durbin has a choice. He can take that blue slip seriously and veto that candidate and not send their nomination to the floor of the Senate. Or he can say, okay, cool, you don't like this person, I'll append a note to our recommending this to the entire Senate for a vote. He's choosing to allow Republicans to cancel, to veto Democratic nominees. Now, what is this whole blue slip thing? Where did this start? Where did this come from? The backstory here starts in 1789. On August 3rd, 1789, President George Washington sent a list of people who, these were officer commissions. Those are also being held up in the Senate right now. They require senatorial approval for a different reason and in a different way. But in any case, George Washington sent a list of naval officers to the Senate, and for the home state senators, each state had 2 senators, still does, for the home state senators to say yes or no to these people. Now, the reason they did this was because if you're George Washington living in Washington, D.C. or Mount Vernon, Virginia, or you're the senator from Massachusetts, or you're the senator from Connecticut, you have no way of knowing in 1789 who this guy is, Benjamin Fishburne of Georgia, who the president has nominated for, a military promotion or for a judgeship. You just have no way of knowing. There was no internet, there's no Wikipedia, there's no mass media. They hadn't even invented the telegraph at that point. There were no national newspapers. So it made perfect sense that if you're the president or if you're other senators, that when a nominee is brought forward from, a state, that you would go to the 2 senators from that state and say, what do you think of this guy? Is he any good? Or is he, a nut job? Is he a drunk? Is he a felon? Is he just a general ass? Should we be considering him or not? And if one of the home state senators says no, then, don't advance that, out of an abundance of caution, don't advance that nomination. And in fact, what happened was Senator James Gunn of Georgia objected to Benjamin Fishburne being nominated by George Washington for this military promotion. Now, the reason he objected was because Fishburne had supported Senator Gunn's opponent, Major General Nathaniel Greene, in a duel that Gunn had challenged Greene to. Gunn walked around for a whole year with a pistol in his belt because he kept hoping that he would run into Greene so he could shoot him. And Fishburne had publicly, basically ridiculed Gunn for this attempted duel. So Gunn vetoed Fishburne. Now, George Washington was seriously pissed off about this. He walked over to the Senate chamber and confronted Gunn and said, why are you doing this? Why are you vetoing my nominee? And Gunn said, under the debate under the consent and advice clause, the advice and consent clause of the Constitution, it's my obligation to advise and consent or withhold my consent. I'm withholding my consent and I'm giving you advice. Don't give this guy a military commission. And Washington said, why? And Senator Gunn said, I don't have to tell you. The advice and consent clause does not require me to give you a reason. Now, because you're the president and because I respect you, I will tell you my reason. My reason is I don't like this guy. But I don't have an obligation to tell you. And that incident in August of 1789 established the precedent that today we refer to as blue slips. And from 1789 up until around 1917, a paper would be distributed from the president about his nominees, and home state senators could object, and generally speaking, the Senate Judiciary Committee respected those objections and didn't let those nominees out, didn't let them go to the floor of the Senate for a vote. Now, this is not a law. It's not even in the Constitution. The Constitution does not mention anything about this. This is a tradition. It's not even a Senate rule. It's a tradition. There's nothing binding to this. In 1917, 105 years ago, Congress tweaked it a little bit, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. They started passing out that letter saying, what do you think about this guy? Printed on a blue piece of paper. And if it was returned with a no, now starting in 1917, see, this was when radio had become a thing. There were now two national radio networks, the Red Network and the Blue Network, which ultimately became CBS and NBC. And there were nationwide newspapers by 1917. So people knew who people were. And so in 1917, they stopped vetoing people, even when they were objected to by the home state senators. And they simply noted, when they passed that nomination along to the floor of the Senate, simply noted, hey, one of the home state senators says don't vote for this guy. You know, which would hurt, but it wasn't a veto. And that stood from 1917, where they did it on blue pieces of paper and they started referring to it as blue slips. That stood until 1955, when Senator James Eastland, the notorious white supremacist, became chair of the Judiciary Committee. Now, 2 years earlier, in 1954, the Supreme Court had ordered public schools to be desegregated, to be integrated racially. And Eastland wanted to make sure that no federal judge would be appointed to the bench, to the federal bench, who would support the Supreme Court's decision in that regard. And so he went back to saying, if a home state senator suspects that one of these judicial nominees might support the Supreme Court's integration order, we will respect that as a veto in the committee. So from 1956 until 1979, while James Eastland was head of the committee, if somebody blue slipped a nominee, if they said no on a blue slip to the nominee, that nominee was toast. It never got out of committee. Now, in 1979, Ted Kennedy came along. He replaced Eastland, and he said, no, we're going to go back to the way it was before 1955. We'll simply tell people somebody objected, but it won't kill the nomination. In 2001, though, Orrin Hatch became the chair, and he went back to James Eastland's rule. And Pat Leahy, when he became the chair in 2003, he followed Eastland's rule, which provoked a 2014 outraged op-ed in the New York Times, official editorial in the New York Times, calling out Leahy for doing this. Now, then in 2019, Lindsey Graham becomes chairman, and he says, we're going to ignore blue slips from Democrats. And that's how they push through a lot of these crazy Republicans that are on the bench right now. They just ignored the Democrats' blue slips. Well, now the head of the Judiciary Committee is Dick Durbin, the senator from Illinois. And he's gone back to doing what James Eastland was doing, which is allowing Republicans to veto Democratic nominees simply because they feel like it. So I'm encouraging people to reach out to Dick Durbin, particularly if you live in Illinois. I was not able to reach any of his offices yesterday. Nobody answered the phone at any of them. But, you know, if you live in the state, maybe they'll answer your phone. Maybe they'll recognize your phone number. Or you can email them. There's other ways to contact the senator. You can tweet him. Let him know what you think about this. I think this is just a travesty.